I don't believe in ghosts, and I never believed it. Even when I was a kid and friends used to scare each other with stories about damn mirrors or women in white, I just shrugged my shoulders. All these things seem to me to be fictions, an attempt to make the world a little more exciting than it really is. And yet, there is one story that I still try not to remember. It's something that's stuck in my memory, like a splinter that can't be pulled out, subtle but painful. It all happened in an old cinema in the hall where I used to work. I didn't see anything supernatural there. No silhouettes, no rustling behind my back, no cold touches on the back of my head. And yet, that evening still haunts me. The cinema was old, with peeling wooden armrests, long heavy curtains on the sides of the screen, and a complete lack of automation. It was a place where almost no one went anymore. We started the tapes manually, the film sometimes got stuck, the image jumped, the sound lagged behind, but that was the whole soul of the institution. I started working there in my senior year of college. Money was needed, and the schedule of the cashier and the assistant projector was quite flexible. The cinema was run by a man in his 60s named Dan. He didn't say much, but he had a strange respect for the film, for the silence before the start of the session, for the rustle of popcorn packages. He didn't put any new items. Instead, he chose old films from the 70s, dramas, thrillers, classic noirs. Sometimes the hall was empty. Sometimes 2 or 3 elderly people would come just to sit in the semi-darkness. I don't think Dan has ever tried to make a business out of this place. He kept it for himself, and for people like him, people who didn't want to live in the rush and chaos of modern times. After a couple of months of work, I began to notice that Dan never entered the gym during sessions. Even if there was a failure, he always asked me to check it yourself. I'll wait downstairs. I didn't think much of it then. Indeed, sometimes seats broke in the hall, films were torn, someone complained about a weak sound, a common routine. But one day I asked him why he was avoiding the gym. He paused and said only, "Some places are better left alone, especially the back row." I chuckled then. I thought it was a joke, some kind of strange allegory. Maybe he has bad memories related to this movie theater. Who knows? But I didn't ask any more. And then that evening came. Friday. The hall is almost empty. There was an old black and white movie on the screen, with Montgomery Clift, I think. Something tragic with slow development. There were 2 people in the middle of the room, an elderly couple who were constantly whispering to each other. I was standing at the projection booth, drinking cold coffee from a vending machine when the screen twitched, then flickered. A typical problem with the tape. I turned off the projector and went downstairs to manually restart the film. I usually entered the hall through a side door. It led directly to the projector room, and I walked along a side path behind the scenes, but that evening I decided to go through the main entrance. I was too lazy to go around the whole hall. When I opened the heavy doors, the hall was plunged into semi-darkness, only weak lighting from the screen and rare lamps near the aisles. That's when I noticed him. The seat in the back row was lowered. The cinema was almost empty, and I knew who was sitting where. But this chair, it was occupied, or at least it looked like it. I looked at him with narrowed eyes. I didn't see the silhouette of a man, but there was that characteristic deflection in the back of the chair, as if someone heavy had leaned on it with his whole body. The armrests were slightly shifted, as if someone was sitting with their arms folded. And it seemed to me, I'm not sure, that there was a smell of sweat from there. Old, ingrained with sweat, like in the dressing room after a match. The smell is pungent, sour, and sticky. I stood there, not moving. The hall was almost silent. An old film was creaking on the screen. I took a step into the aisle and looked towards the couple. They didn't notice anything. They just whispered and stared at the screen. I looked at the back row again. The chair was empty. I had to leave, go back to the projector room, and start the film. But something inside me jerked. I wanted to understand, just to check. I walked past all the rows, feeling my sneakers creak softly on the sticky carpet. The light grew dimmer the further I walked. The air was getting heavier. I could feel him pressing on my chest. It wasn't fear. It was intense. It was like I knew I was making a mistake, but I couldn't stop. When I got to the back row, I slowly extended my hand towards a chair. It was warm. I don't understand how this is possible. No one should have been sitting there. I didn't see anyone coming through. And the smell, it's stronger now. I could taste the smell in my mouth. It seemed to stick to the roof of my mouth, to my tongue. I recoiled and coughed. At that moment, I heard someone exhale. A faint, barely discernible sound, right next to my ear. It wasn't loud, but it was real enough that I jumped back and dropped the flashlight. He rolled under the chair, and the light disappeared. I didn't run. I just got up and walked back without turning around. I didn't check who it could be. He didn't look at the chair. I knew I wasn't going back there anymore. Not for money, not for explanations. The film was not played that evening. An elderly couple left the hall, and I apologized as much as I could. Dan didn't ask anything. He just nodded and said, "You know now, too." I haven't been to that movie theater since. Even when it was bought out and an art house center was built, I avoided this place. Because it was real. Without any mysticism. Someone was sitting in that chair. Someone who shouldn't have been there. And I don't want to know who anymore. After that night, I tried to forget about it. Just erase it from my mind. But it stuck. Not as something scary in the classical sense, no. It's like something dirty, sticky, like you touched something you shouldn't have touched. A couple of days later, I wrote a letter of resignation. He didn't say why. Dan didn't ask. He just nodded, as if he already understood everything. His gaze, calm, but burned out by some inner knowledge now, seemed heavier to me than before. I got a job somewhere else. He worked in a warehouse, then in a printing house. Day after day, shift after shift, it's all the same. And everything would be fine if it weren't for a strange thing. I started noticing cinemas. Before that, I had passed by them without looking, but now my gaze clung to the old facades, forgotten posters, and empty halls with peeling stucco ceilings. I wasn't looking for them on purpose. It just happened that way, as if something inside was looking for confirmation or a sequel. I don't know. Several times I found myself standing at one of these cinemas and just looking at the entrance. Without going in, without asking. I'm just standing there waiting. I couldn't figure out what. Sometimes I went inside just to make sure everything was normal. People, tickets, popcorn. It's real. But in each of these halls, I looked for the back row. And every time it clicked inside, that's not it. Not here. It's safe here. It's been almost 6 months. I had almost convinced myself that everything I felt that evening was a figment of my imagination. Maybe I just overexerted myself. Perhaps the smell was from the air conditioner, the chair was reclined by someone earlier, and everything coincided at the wrong moment. I even started watching old movies again, as if I were trying to regain the sense of comfort that they used to give me. But every time I turned on a black and white frame with a crackle of film, I felt something cold freeze in my body. Not fear, and the expectation. One evening, a friend called me. He knew that I used to work in a cinema and offered to help organize a retrospective screening in another old hall. The theater has just been renovated. It was big and dusty, with chairs that creaked at the slightest movement. I agreed. To be honest, I wanted to make sure everything was okay. I wanted to get rid of the tension that had been building up in me for the past few months. We came the day before the show to check everything out. Stage, screen, projector, sound. Everything was going smoothly. But when I walked through the hall, just to figure out where to put the table with the programs, I noticed it again, the back row. I didn't touch him. Didn't fit. I just looked at it. Everything was fine there. Smooth chairs, everything is clean. But I saw one seat that seemed to have something pressed into it. Quite a bit. Not like then. But it's enough to make something inside me shrink. I wanted to go over and check it out. I really wanted to. But then someone called out to me. The organizer's assistant called for help with carrying the boxes. I looked away and walked away, trying not to turn around. The screening was quiet. People came, sat, laughed in the right places, and froze when the movie got tense. I stood at the side of the entrance, watching, and everything was fine, until the last scene. One man came out of the hall, slowly, with a tense face. I noticed him walking down the row and up the steps, stopping for a second at the back seat. He didn't touch it. I just looked at it, and then he turned around and left. Quickly. After graduation, I found this man on the street. He was standing on the sidelines, smoking. I came over and asked if everything was okay. He looked at me. His eyes were strained, but not scared. He asked me, "You used to work at another movie theater, right? The old one with the leather chairs." I froze. He nodded. He took a drag on his cigarette, held the smoke, and let it out slowly. I was there too. A year ago. At the evening screening. I'll just say that there are things that don't belong among people. Not because they're evil or scary. It's because they are the forgotten ones. And they want to be remembered. He threw away the cigarette and left without saying goodbye. I remained standing in the dark. The noise of the people behind him was fading away. And I realized that everything that happened back then wasn't over. It wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of something. Not supernatural. The real one. Human. Maybe someone died in that chair. Maybe there was someone who was forgotten, and he just stayed. I wasn't looking for movie theaters anymore. I wasn't looking for the back rows. I don't go to old movies anymore. I even threw away my favorite tapes. But when I see a poster with a classic name and a room with vintage chairs on the street, I feel my chest freeze again. Because I know that somewhere, in some room, one chair is still waiting. Not you, not me, and the attention. And more than anything, I'm afraid one day I won't be able to resist and sit down there. Sometimes it seems to me that all I felt then, that cold in the chair, the crack in the leather upholstery, someone else's presence, was not just a sensation. It was a warning. Not mystical, not supernatural. Present, like a scar left over from an old wound. You can't see it, but you can feel it every time you pull on your skin. And the further I lived, the more clearly I realized that something was wrong in those halls. And this not so is not about the otherworldly. It's about people. One evening, on my way home, I passed a boarded-up movie theater. A huge old building covered with a construction grid. Behind her, the metal frame of the stage stuck out like a skeleton. I slowed down my pace. There was an old poster in the window, faded from the sun. It was almost unreadable, but I noticed the director's name. The same thing that happened in that session when it all started. I do not know what motivated me, but I walked around the perimeter of the building. It was as if something was pushing me to check. I wasn't looking for answers. I just wanted to understand. I saw an open door in a side alley. A small, technical one with a rusty nameplate without an inscription. Maybe someone forgot to close it. Maybe someone wanted me to come in. But there was no pressure, no mysterious force. Just me and my decision. I went in. The interior smelled of mold and old wood. There's almost no light, just a thin strip from a street lamp through a crack in the ceiling. The dust hung in the air like smoke. Step by step, I made my way through the corridors, remembering the layout of the old cinemas. It wasn't just an interest. It was akin to wanting to purify oneself. Go through to the end. I reached the hall. It was full, not by people but by history. There are traces of time in every chair. Dents, cuts, stickers with numbers, peel tags. I didn't know who was sitting here before, but by the way the carpet by the aisle was crumpled, by the stain on the armrest in the 6th row, by the broken handrail, I saw that a lot had happened here once. And not everything was related to the movies. I went to the back row. Gradually, almost without breathing. He was the same as he was then. It seems to be. Only one chair looked different. It was newer. A slightly different shade. It's like he's been replaced. Or not. It was exactly the same, but it was as if no one had touched it. At all. Clean, smooth. No wrinkles or scuff marks. I didn't sit down. I was just watching. And then I noticed there was a piece of paper folded in half under the seat. I bent down and picked it up. The paper was old, yellow at the edges. No labels on the back. Just one paragraph, written with a ballpoint pen and pressure, as if they were writing quickly in a hurry. If you found it, it means you felt it too. We're not crazy. We just know that there are places where other people's actions get stuck. Not ghosts. Not souls. And the moment itself, which was not completed. When you sit down there, you finish for someone. Sometimes you just watch a movie that you haven't watched. Sometimes it's more than that. Then it's empty. No name. No date. No signature. I stood with this note in my hands and realized that everything I had experienced back then had something much more scary than mysticism. This is something understandable. The irreversible. It's like a stuck transmission in a car. It just doesn't let you move forward. And someone has to switch it, even if it costs something real. Suddenly the phone rang. I was startled. Not from fear, but from a sound that suddenly brought me back to reality. A familiar number. My former replacement from that movie theater. We haven't talked for a long time. I replied. His voice was strangled. Hi. You were in the gym back then, too, when did the chair jerk? I froze. What happened? Our boyfriend is missing. He left to close the hall after the last show. The cameras captured him sitting down in the very last chair. And then that's it. There's no way out. No entrance. Just a shadow, as if someone is passing by the screen. Without a face. I don't believe in ghosts, you know. But this is not normal. I was silent. Because I felt like everything I was trying to forget was coming back. Only now it's not just about me. It's a system. Not magic. Not otherworldly. It's like some kind of repetitive mechanism that starts in old places where people leave unfinished things. Not physically, but emotionally. A session that can't be finished until someone else watches it. Or he won't sit down. Or it won't stay. I didn't tell him about the note. He just said, "Get out of there. Don't work there anymore." He didn't answer. I just hung up the phone. I walked out of the cinema without looking back. He crumpled up the note and threw it into the trash. I didn't want anyone else to find her. I didn't feel like a hero or a witness. I was just a man who got in the wrong seat one day. One evening, I was walking home through the center and saw a new ad. On an old billboard, still with peeling paint and cracked edges, hung a poster, screening of a unique restored film. Just one evening, only for a select few. No names, no names. Only the image of the hall from the back row is very blurred, as if it was taken on an old film. And the address, the same movie theater. Only now it no longer looked abandoned. Judging by the poster, it would be reopened as if nothing had happened. I stopped, looking at the poster. I wasn't scared. There was another emotion, annoyance, almost anger, to those who decided to bring this place back to life, as if nothing had happened there, as if people hadn't disappeared there. It's like an armchair is an ordinary armchair. I knew it wasn't alive, wasn't cursed, but something about it was upsetting the course of things, like a splinter stuck under the skin of the past. And if the screenings start again, if people come there, what then? The next day, I returned there in the afternoon. The cinema was not officially open yet, but the doors were already open, and preparations were underway inside. I entered calmly, as if I had been invited here. It smelled of paint, new carpet, and something pungent and technical. The cleaners were busy with the chairs, and someone was fixing the lights. No one stopped me. I went into the hall. All the rows were new, bright red upholstery, metal armrests. Except for the back one. He remained the same, one-on-one, as if it hadn't been touched on purpose. Or they couldn't. I came closer. It's the same chair, with no trace of time, as if isolated from everything else. It even seemed to me that someone had recently been sitting in it. The seat was slightly bent. There was a folder on the floor below him. A standard stationery with a faded tag. I opened it. There are photos inside. Black and white. The old. At first, I didn't understand what was on them. People in the audience. I recognized some of them as former employees. One of them was an old friend of mine. The other is a man whose face flashed on the bulletin board in the department as missing. The row number and date were written in the corner of each photo. It's the same for everyone. The one when I first felt out of place in that session. And under the last picture, where the back row was empty, there was another note. Typewritten. Some things don't have a logical explanation, but that doesn't make them mystical. It's just that not everything is recorded by the camera, not everything is logged. Some disappearances are not being investigated because no one is sure that they occurred. But we know. We who were sitting there. I stood up, holding the folder, and felt footsteps behind me. He turned around. The guy in uniform. Probably a security guard. "I'm sorry you can't come here," he said, but without aggression. "Installation is underway here. The opening is coming soon." I showed him the folder. "Who left this?" He shrugged his shoulders. "I have no idea. We found her yesterday. We thought it was the old archives. The director told her to throw out, but she keeps coming back to the same place. We've already cleaned it 3 times. I didn't say anything. I just handed the folder to him. He took it and, without opening it, walked towards the exit. I stayed in the hall for another minute. He was looking at the chair. Then he turned around and left. There was a strange feeling inside, not fear, but some kind of impending decision. It's like the movie hasn't started yet, and you already know the ending. A week has passed. I was walking down the street again and saw a queue at the entrance. People are dressed up, discussing, taking pictures against the background of the poster. No one knows what happened before. No one is interested in who is sitting in that chair before them. And most likely, they won't even notice that one of them is different. I looked at it from afar, from the other side of the street. I don't know why I didn't leave right away. Maybe he wanted to make sure everything went as it should. That everything is simple, restoration, business, entertainment. Nothing else. But when the lights went out in the lobby and everyone came in, I noticed a woman. She left the hall just a minute later. Quickly, without looking back. She walked towards a park with what looked like a piece of paper in her hand. I crossed the street and followed her. Not as a stalker, but as a person who recognized the sign. She sat down on a bench, straightened the sheet with trembling fingers, as if she wanted to make sure that it was real. I came closer and asked, "Did you find him?" She looked up. The lamplight glinted on her cheeks. She nodded. "I just sat down," she whispered. and I felt as if someone was already there, not nearby, and inside, not a spirit, not a voice, just a memory, but not mine. I sat down next to him. We were silent, long. Then she got up and left without saying goodbye. The sheet remained on the bench. I didn't take it. I just sat there, and he understood this is not the end. This is the beginning of a new version of an old story. Only now it's not just one person, and all those who will sit there after. I sat on that bench until the concrete started to get cold under my feet. People were passing by, some with coffee, some with children, some hurrying to an evening session, not knowing that the hall they were heading to held more than just a movie. I didn't want to go back there anymore, not because I was afraid, but because I knew that every time someone sits in that chair, they leave something invisible behind. And if enough of these footprints gather, they will overflow the space. It won't hold up, and then not only people will start disappearing. It's been a few days since then. I didn't follow the news. There was no need. I already knew everything I needed to know. But one morning, out of habit, I opened my mail and saw an email with no subject. There was no sender. Inside is a short message. You were in the last row. You stayed. That's enough. And below is the attachment, a scan of the photo. A snapshot of the hall. Completely empty. All the chairs are new, except for one thing. The one, it was slightly bent again, and there was that folder in it. I haven't slept in almost 2 days. I kept going over in my head what it could mean. Who sent it? Why? And most importantly, why is this room still popping up? It's a chair. Why me? I wasn't the first or the last person to sit there. I left alive. Maybe that's the point. I decided to come back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to understand. Make a point. That evening, I walked past the cinema again. The box office was open. There was an evening screening in the hall. I didn't buy a ticket. I just walked around the back of the building, through the old doorway that everyone had forgotten, but which still led to the service entrance. Everything was quiet inside. There was only the muffled sound of the projector. I moved cautiously, like a man who already knows what he's looking for. I walked down the corridor and turned into the service room where the old equipment used to be. It was empty now, but there were black bags in the corner. A lot. These are used for decommissioned property. I opened one, and there was a chair inside. That's the one, with the armrest torn off. So they decided to remove it after all. Change. But I saw him in the audience. I rummaged through the bags. There was more than one. There were several of them. The same chair. An exact copy. Each one is slightly damaged, but still recognizable. I stood motionless, feeling that same feeling rising inside me. Not fear, but what comes right after it. A cold, measured understanding that someone was trying to hide their tracks. Or vice versa, save them. There was a commotion outside. Someone opened the door. I froze, but the footsteps were receding. I went out through the same doorway and just walked down the street without turning around. I wasn't thinking. I didn't analyze it. A couple of days later, a message flashed in the news. Unexplained incident at the cinema. During the evening screening, several viewers left in the middle of the session, complaining of a sharp deterioration in their health and panic attacks. I turned off the TV. I haven't been to the cinema since. Not at all. I even walked by with an uneasy feeling that somewhere in the back of the room, that chair was waiting for me again. I knew it wasn't just one thing anymore. They could make copies. They could change the upholstery. They could even move it to another room. But it was still itself. It has not disappeared. It just became part of something bigger. And everyone who sits down leaves a piece of themselves in it.